In the glittering world of 1,950 seconds Hollywood, she was impossible to ignore, radiant, poised, breathtaking. When Dorothy Dandridge walked into a room, cameras turned before she even spoke. Her name promised beauty. Her presence commanded silence. But beneath the shimmer, there was something darker, a silence too heavy for applause to drown out. She wasn't just a woman chasing fame, she was a woman fighting to exist in a world that only pretended to see her. They called her a star, but treated her like an illusion. They celebrated her success, yet erased her story. Dorothy Dandridge wasn't simply forgotten. She was buried beneath the image Hollywood wanted her to be. Because in the city of dreams, some stars don't fade, they're erased on purpose. Dorothy Jean Dandridge was born in Cleveland, Ohio, in 1922, a world where talent had color and dreams had limits. Her mother, Ruby, raised her with one unshakable truth. If no one opened the door, you build your own stage. From dusty roadshows to jazz clubs lit by cigarette smoke, Dorothy learned how to hold a crowd, how to make strangers stop breathing for just a second when she sang. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was her courage that set her apart. When Carmen Jones hit theaters in 1954, everything changed. Dorothy became a revelation, the first black woman nominated for an Academy Award. For one glorious moment, Hollywood applauded a woman it never truly intended to accept. She became the face of progress and the symbol of boundaries that still refused to break. Behind the smiles and gowns, she carried the quiet ache of someone who knew. Every step forward came with a shadow close behind. Dorothy's journey began far from the red carpets that would one day know her name. Raised by a mother who performed for pennies and applause, she grew up backstage, watching the world through the curtain, dreaming of the day the lights would be hers. She sang with the Dandridge sisters, traveling from small towns to smoky ballrooms, her voice glowing with youth and hope. Each performance was a promise that she would rise above the roles the world had written for her. Hollywood noticed her long before it accepted her. She appeared in bit parts, always flawless, always secondary, the beautiful background. But Dorothy was never meant to stay in the background. Then came Carmen Jones. She didn't just play a role, she became a force. Her eyes held defiance, her voice carried danger and desire. The performance didn't just earn her an Oscar nomination, it made her unforgettable. But even as she stood beneath the brightest spotlight, Dorothy sensed the darkness waiting at the edges. Because in Hollywood, the higher you shine, the more they wait for you to fall. Fame didn't save Dorothy, it surrounded her like a mirror she couldn't escape. Every reflection was beautiful, but never quite her own. The magazines praised her elegance, the studios showcased her smile, but no one wanted to know the woman behind the perfection. She was invited to the parties but watched from the corners. She could sing on the grandest stages but couldn't stay in the same hotels as her co-stars. Her world sparkled, but the glass was cold. When she fell in love with director Otto Preminger, it was more than romance, it was rebellion. A black woman and a white man, in the heart of segregated Hollywood, it was a line she wasn't supposed to cross. The whispers began, and so did the punishment. Roles disappeared. Invitations stopped. The machine that once adored her now turned its back. Her finances crumbled. Her trust was betrayed by the men who promised to protect her. And behind that dazzling smile, Dorothy began to fade, not from lack of talent, but from exhaustion. Hollywood had used her image to sell its dreams, and when it was done, it quietly erased her from its story. By the early 1,960 seconds, Dorothy Dandridge was no longer the name on everyone's lips. The cameras that once adored her had turned elsewhere, chasing new faces, safer choices. The woman who broke barriers now stood outside the walls she once helped open. She tried to start again, taking work in small clubs, her voice softer, her gaze distant. The applause was polite, not thunderous. Each night felt like a haunting the memory of a fame that no longer belonged to her. Her wealth was gone, her home nearly empty, but the real loss was invisible, the faith that hard work could change the world. Still, she carried herself with grace, dressing like the star she refused to stop being. Friends spoke of her loneliness, of her quiet days, and her sudden disappearances from public view. Then, in 1965, came the news that silenced everyone. Dorothy Dandridge was gone, found alone in her apartment, her story ending far too soon. The papers called it a tragic accident. Those who knew her called it inevitable, because for years she had been disappearing long before the world noticed. The morning her death hit the headlines, Hollywood barely paused. A few polite articles, a few recycled photographs, then silence. The same studios that once fought to capture her face now acted as if she had never existed. She left behind little more than memories, a daughter, a few friends, and the echo of a voice that once filled theaters. But to those who truly knew her, Dorothy's story was more than tragedy. It was a reflection of a system that rewarded beauty and punished truth. Her mother, Ruby, wept quietly at her funeral, a modest ceremony, attended by a handful of those who remembered the promise that once surrounded her. There were no grand tributes, no film retrospectives, only a casket, a few fading flowers, and the feeling that something magnificent had been wasted. Hollywood moved on, but the silence that followed her lingered deep, haunting, unfinished. Dorothy Dandridge had not simply died. She had been written out of the very story she helped create. Yet even in that silence, her presence refused to vanish. It was as if the universe itself whispered her name not in pity, but in remembrance. For years after her passing, Dorothy Dandridge's name was little more than a footnote in Hollywood's history, a ghost among the golden idols. But time, as it often does, began to unearth what the world tried to forget. In 1999, actress Halle Berry brought Dorothy's story back to life in introducing Dorothy Dandridge, a performance that felt more like resurrection than portrayal. When Halle won the Golden Globe and later the Oscar, she dedicated her victory to the woman who had come before her. It was as if, decades later, the door Dorothy once knocked on had finally opened. Today, her image shines not for the fame she lost, but for the path she carved. Every black actress who steps into the spotlight, from Viola Davis to Zendaya, walks in the light Dorothy left behind. People revisit Carmen Jones and see not just a film, but a revolution disguised as art. Her eyes, her voice, her silence all became symbols of defiance and dignity. Dorothy Dandridge may have been erased from her time, but history, at last, remembered. And in that remembrance, she became eternal. Dorothy Dandridge's life was a paradox, a blend of brilliance and heartbreak, applause and silence. She reached heights no one before her had dared to climb, yet she stood there utterly alone. Fame gave her the world's attention, but it never gave her belonging. She was both the dream and the warning, the proof that breaking barriers can come with invisible wounds. In her reflection, we see the cruelty of an industry that worships beauty but fears truth, that celebrates difference only when it can control it. Yet even through the silence that followed her fall, her light persisted. It glowed in every performance that dared to challenge the rules, in every actress who refused to shrink to fit a mold. Dorothy's story reminds us that legends aren't only made of success sometimes, they are forged in pain, endurance, and grace. Fame made her visible. Shadow made her human. Together, they made her unforgettable. What do you see when you think of Dorothy Dandridge, the beauty, the tragedy, or the courage to stand alone in a world built to silence her? If she could speak to us now, maybe she'd ask one question: do you finally see me? Tell us what her story means to you in the comments below. Share her name, her strength, her light, because no one deserves to be forgotten. Like, comment, and subscribe to keep her memory alive, and to uncover the untold stories of stars who lived between fame and shadows. Fame and shadows, every star has its story.